All right. Good morning, everyone. How are we doing today?
Now I'm good.
Now you're doing good. Happy to hear. So today we have a new member, Katerina. How are you?
I'm fine.
Happy to hear. So Katerina is actually also in Android. Katerina, just to let you know, Murad and Enrique, they are also in Android, but they started last August. So they are already in the Android part. But nonetheless, we are here to then speak about the book circle. Did you all had the chance to read today's pages? Um, any thoughts? So just this is more for Katerina. As you notice, Katerina, the book is organized in such a way like each chapter is kind of independent from one another. It's like small articles. The book is a combination of articles. That's why I said to the new students that you can just jump in and you have not really missed anything. Like it's not a novel or anything like that. But anyways, I thought this week's chapters were quite technical compared to the ones we had in the past. That could be good, that could be bad, because it might be a little bit more boring compared to the ones we had last time. Do you guys agree that it was
Yeah,
highly
that's right.
technical? Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
let's start with the one that was not highly technical because I feel it goes a little bit in aligned to what we have spoken in the past, which is this one of fulfill your ambitions with open source. With open source, what do you guys think about that? Any thoughts on that particular article?
I mean
I
the one
have.
with the. Okay, go
No,
ahead.
no, you go, Murat, go.
No, I mean you mean to fulfill your ambitions with open source. Okay, okay,
Any
okay,
thoughts?
Enrique. The stage
It
is
is a,
yours.
it is. I haven't meddled into it yet, but
Mm,
it is a good starting point. For example, I'm into video games, and there's a bunch of apps related to video games, so I can, and most of them are fan made, therefore they're mostly open source. So that's a good way to just like go in, get the repo, just read it, implement it, and then you can, at the least, you can have it as a fork on your own machine and do modifications for on your own, and you will still learn a lot. So yeah,
exactly. We have spoken in the past in previous weeks about how to become better at programming. We have spoken that one of those ways of becoming good at programming is by doing your own projects. And sometimes, which Enrique also mentioned in the past, like, but what do I build? What's an idea that I could use? And I mentioned how the idea should be motivated by a need that you might have. But another way of doing or satisfying your need is by looking into what is out there in terms of open source and just contributing. So let me give you an example. There was one tool, or there is a tool. Let me see. I think it's one tool that I use with you guys for the education. And I needed it, and I said, I don't have the time to build this thing. So I said, okay, let me look for a tool that can offer me that. And I found one that was, let's say, 90% of what I needed. There was a 10%, a little feature that I needed, but they didn't offer it. So guess what I did? I created a fork of the repository. I implemented the feature that I needed, which was going to be significantly quicker than me creating the whole thing. And then I said, okay, at the very least, I have what I want. I am going to like make a pull request. If they want it,
they
okay,
can
it's up
have
to
it.
them. If they don't want it, I know I have my version, okay? And I can do what I need with my students. Luckily for me, they accepted it also. So that was nice because it's a small project. It's a very small project. I think it's only like if you if you look at the history, only two people have committed in there, the owner, of course, and that specific commit. And it was nice. It was a nice experience because I got to speak to this guy. I think he's from Norway. The problem I have noticed for that project, he's not very active. And I remember not so long ago, actually for the new group, for the group that Katerina started, I needed a new feature from that guy again. So I created a new pull request, but the guy took like 2 months to respond. So I was a little bit upset because I'm like, hey, I really need this thing. Please at least tell me if you want it, if you not. So it was very, at the end, I used my version. But anyways, it was really, really nice to interact with other people. So I can highly recommend that to you guys. For example, all of you are in Android. So let's say that you want to practice your Android. You go ahead, you find some Android project out there, and trust me, there are hundreds and hundreds of projects in GitHub, by the way, which all of you are familiar with. And you say, okay, let me try to contribute something. And now you might say, Humberto, but what am I going to contribute? That's going to be the obvious next question. Humberto, what am I going to contribute? Especially if it's a very big project. Just as the book said, it doesn't necessarily have to start with code. It can be by making a pull request to improve something in the documentation. Hey, this is not clear. I'm going to make a pull request to suggest an improvement. Or the documentation you see that is outdated, I'm going to improve it. Stuff like that. You can start like that. And a lot of developers, they have this badge of honor when you say that you have been able to contribute to an open source project. It really gives pride, I have to be honest. I was happy, even though that project is only used like by 3 people. I was really happy to have connected with this guy, even though I have never really spoken to him in real life, if you know what I mean. So I can highly, highly, highly recommend that. Look for projects, especially for you, Murad and Enrique, that you're already in the Android part and you have already been doing it for a few months now. Find a project, and that could be your way of learning from other. Yeah. Also, for example, Enrique, I know you were doing some Jetpack Compose. Another way of learning Jetpack Compose: look for an app, download it or clone it to your local repository, open the thing, run it, and start tweaking it. That is the best way of learning. I wanted to create a software once for some tools that I was new to it. And I said, okay, let me find a project that has approximately the features that I want to implement. I'm going to download that project. I cloned it and I started playing with the project. And by playing, I meant deleting code, adding code, changing code, just to explore how the changes that I made reflected on the app. And trust me, it's not only entertaining, but it's also much more enjoyable than just sitting down, reading a bunch of text of doing this, and that. You are literally exploring. And the best part is, let's say, hypothetically speaking, that you mess everything up and the whole thing just doesn't work anymore. Well, just delete it and clone it again, and that's it. So at the end, you don't have anything to lose. And at this moment, I'm also in that same scenario. Soon I'm going to start using technology that I have not used, and I'm in this stage like, okay, I need to find a project that has approximately all the features or close to all the features that I want, because I'm going to start becoming a Frankenstein here, experimenting with the thing.
Take from here, put in there.
Exactly. So I can highly recommend that to all of you. Any thoughts on that? Any thoughts? Does it sound, no, Humberto, you're crazy? Or, hey, Humberto, I think I can do this. Any thoughts? Anyone?
No, it's something that we can do. It's something that we can do.
Mm.
It's like it's a nice idea. It's a nice idea. I just need to find one particular project that interests me more than one level. So it's like something that I like for a problem that I want to solve, to have the double interest about it. So that way I can read it, and because if I understand the problem that the app is trying to solve, then I can understand better the code. But yeah, it's just about finding that project just to play with it. But playing with a project like that is super fun. It is super fun. I did that with the Mapbox
Yeah, exactly.
API. They provide an app pre-made, so I took a lot from there when I used it.
I would say one challenge that you kind of experience, that's the only kind of headache, depends on the technology and so on, but one headache that you do encounter sometimes, and I did encounter that, was you need to configure the project sometimes. So you download the thing, the documentation says, as an example, clone it, click the play button, and off you go. But then you clone it, you click the play button, and off you do not go. The whole thing is broken. So that is usually like the initial and the first roadblock that you experience. And I did experience that a number of times. I downloaded the thing and I'm like, why is it not even working? It is, I'm following the instructions. And that's an example of eventually you solve it and you realize, wait a minute, I had to do stuff that the instructions didn't even tell me. That's an example of how to do a pull request to improve that documentation. So for example, for this guy, the one from Norway, in the documentation, I was literally doing to the step, and and it was always breaking for me. And I realized, oh, wait a minute, because the example that he gives works for his profile, for his username, because he has those projects. But when I try to run it with my username, the whole thing breaks because I don't have those projects. So the example that he gave on the documentation was correct for him.
Generic.
For him, exactly, but not generic. So I made a pull request. Hey, this thing only works for you. You need to make it a little bit more generic. So anyway, we had some conversations, we improved it, and so on. But things like that, for example, things like that, I highly recommend. Nice. But let's continue. That was, I would say, the first one that was more enjoyable from all of them. Let's talk a little bit about do not touch that code. Any thoughts on that? We're getting a little bit more technical now, but any thoughts on that? Here they speak about staging server, local server, developer server. Any thought? Production server. Any thoughts on that? Do you know what that means? Any thoughts?
I heard the stories. I heard the stories.
Murad?
It makes super sense.
Yeah. Okay, I did make a note here because discuss about the importance of developers not having access to staging or production servers to prevent issues and maintain a structured development process. It outlines a common web development architecture and emphasizing that developers should work primarily on their local machines and the development server, like leaving the staging and production environment to quality assurance teams and release managers.
Correct.
So because this separation ensures that changes are systematically tested and validated.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
and for reducing the risk of errors and maintaining the integrity of the production environment.
Katerina, were you going to say something earlier?
No, probably no, that's already said. Yeah, so it's really important. So everybody take their part. QA has their own environment, so development their own and stage. And if it's a problem, yes, so that begin from the development part. So we created new feature. We try unit testing it on our side in development stage. Then we turn it to the QA. They run their integration test, system test, and then after that, on the prod, they use their own test.
Exactly.
So yes, if we change something there, so we
can break things.
Like break steps, and we are committed to the prod. We will we'll have the bug probably.
Exactly.
But
so
yeah, very
exactly.
luckily.
So usually there's I guess everyone understands production as an example. That's like where the real data is. Like, for example, if I were to accidentally delete, let's speak about Instagram, the production server, and I delete something there, then the user will be literally affected. Now, when you're developing, there's going to be errors, there's going to be stuff. So how do you develop so that without the risk of damaging the production, then you create the production environment, then you create another environment, like for example, the development environment, which is kind of a replica to some extent of the production. But if things go wrong, you're not really affecting any user. For example, in one job that I had, we had, as this they provide here, we had 3 environments. We had the local environment, which was literally on your computer, that only ran on your computer. And whatever I did there only affected my computer. Then we had the staging environment that was already on the cloud. And then we had the production. We didn't have access to the production. And that is, of course, to prevent what all of you mentioned, that if I'm implementing something. I'm not going to be touching production. Here's the thing. The reason I'm laughing, the reason I'm smiling is because although that's how it should be, sometimes you don't do it, especially when you are like a small team. So let me give you an example. I have some for the plugin stuff. I have some databases and I have some stuff. I don't really have like staging environment and production environment. Sometimes I do things directly on production, and I know I'm running a risk because I can be deleting a bunch of stuff. But yeah, it's something that you do need to take in place. Like you need to have separate environments so that you do not really mess up production. At the end of the day, I don't really have many users. So if something happens, I would just have to go directly to your projects and fix it myself. But if we are like really, really strict, if this thing were to grow more, then of course I need to create that separation. But it's funny because you hear this story from me, but if you speak to other people that are like they have their own company, but a small company, UCA, they know they have to do this thing, but they work directly from production. And if you go online and you start looking into like memes and all these things, one common theme is these memes around the concept of developers working on production because they know it's a risk, but well, sometimes you have to do it. But anyways, that is basically the about this thing. Go ahead, Enrique.
My cousin told me a story like a couple of years ago, first week on the job. Right, he started a new company. Okay, I'm setting up this. This is your development environment, but he was doing some stuff, and then he found a bug, so he deleted the database
locally.
Yeah, locally. No, he deleted the database on the develop environment. The thing is that the develop environment was linked to the production database.
So he deleted the production database.
He deleted the production database.
So what happened then? They reverted
yes, the manager. So his superior went to him like, hey, what happened? And he was like, oh no, I encountered this problem, so I just cleaned the database. He was like, oh, but it's that was the production database. And my cousin was like, why you have the production database linked to the development environment?
Yeah.
So they went to the superior, and he was not fired. He was not fired, but it was a close one. But yeah, that kind of things happen.
Exactly. It should be a replica, like the structure, all that stuff should be the same. But I would have imagined as well, why would they be connected? Then it's not a truly development environment.
Yeah.
Because I could mess up something in production. But anyway, things that you learn and things that you do need to do. But yeah, anyways, any thoughts on that? Any more thoughts on that concept?
So in my work, previously we have this team. Sometimes, after all, we are a team. Yes, so I work as QA. So developer and QA, they work on the same goal. Yes, so the goal is we have the working product. But in the end, sometimes developer help us create our test, and sometimes we help developer create our test. That's the amount of the team on each side is like really matter. So if we have one developer and one tester, okay, but if we have 5 developer and 1 tester, it
could be difficult. Correct. And that's
so it's like perfect life, perfect condition. We have all stages and we have our own responsibility. But
correct.
It
doesn't happen all the time. Exactly. It doesn't happen all the time. No, that's correct. And you mentioned something interesting that you guys, QA, help people or help create tests for developers. And at the same time, then developers help the QA. And that gives, it's not directly the same, but can be a good introduction or segue into this page 70, the golden rule of API design. This was also a technical article, but I would like to emphasize a little bit more on what Katerina mentioned. So it is, I remember in the last company I worked, we didn't really have a QA person, like a person dedicated, or a team for that matter, dedicated to QA. Usually it was within ourselves. We tested the code. Sorry, not the code, but the app before releasing it. It could be ourselves, or it could be people from backend. But the problem is no one wanted to do that because there was a huge list of it was a protocol that it just said literally you have to go step by step, and it's a checklist. And it was a little bit boring, and it took a little bit of time also because you had to generate. I guess you had to do that as well, Caterina. Like you had a bunch of.
So I was in automation. So I automated these cases. So,
Okay.
but sometimes I help manual also. So yes, step by step, created them, and then yes.
Exactly. We had a part that was automated. There were other parts that you just have to click and see if the thing actually works. So yeah. Anyways, and no one wanted to do that. And we realized. I mean, we did our job, but we realized that there was one little problem when we, the developers, tested the thing that we created, and that was that sometimes our mindset was a little bit biased, I think, because we worked on the actual product. So many stuff escaped from us that should have not escaped. And we realized we always like to give it to the guy who worked in the hardware. Not only I think he had a nature for finding problems, but because he was not involved on the day-to-day of the mobile app, and also he used the app from a different perspective, he was able to find things like, how in the world would you find such a thing? Some of them were like really, really edge cases that we're like, hey, our users are not going to do those things. But many of them are like, okay, I didn't know this thing happened. So I think there is a benefit from having a team or a person dedicated to just not being influenced by the actual development, because sometimes certain things could escape. But yeah, and why is that relevant? Because here on this particular chapter, he speaks about when you create an API. It could be literally the API what we're discussing in module 202, the API between computers, but it could also be just an interface when you create classes, for example. When you create functions, we explore that, yeah, when you create a class, when you create a function, everything is encapsulated in there. And if you have to make a change, you make it in that function and that's it. But if you change the interface of that function, then that change is going to propagate everywhere. I'm pretty sure you have experienced that. You change the function name, you have to change everywhere. You change the number of parameters, you have to change it everywhere. You change the return type, you have to change everywhere. So that is what it means by the interface. The body will not affect, but the interface, yes. So when you are working with software that is being used by a lot of people, you do need to be conscious about the design of your interfaces and how changes to that interface could affect existing people and previous people. An example of that is, okay, with you guys, I always kind of have this problem. For example, I release new features every new generation. So for example, for the Caterina generation, I release features that you guys don't have. Yeah. And in my scenario, I don't really care, in the sense that the new version of the homework and the auto grading is not compatible with your version, actually. So if you try to push code in your Kotlin homework, it will not work. Like the auto grading will not work. In my case, exactly, that thing is no longer working for you guys. Why? Because I changed a lot of interfaces that are available only for the Caterina generation onwards. And I said, okay, this is a little bit of a problem. Let me tell you why. Because I always have the following scenario. Even though you guys are in Android, I always have students that are still in the previous part. And guess what happens? Their homework no longer works, because by the time I release the new stuff, yeah, their homework. So I need to manually go and fix their stuff so that the interfaces match the new version. So I said, this is a headache. And I have them looking into this, or using this chapter, for example, as inspiration, starting the Caterina generation. Now, it doesn't really matter when you create, it will always be backwards compatible. So you always need to think about that when you create interfaces and stuff like that. It might not be that big of a deal right now because the projects that you will be working are pretty much your own projects, but still, even then, when you create a class, when you create a function, think about, okay, how is this thing supposed to be used? And how does the changes that I'm about to do could affect other users? Again, it's not that big of a problem, especially with IntelliJ and Android Studio. You do refactoring and makes the whole change for you automatically. But still, it's something that you have to keep in mind. Go ahead, Enrique. You had your hand raised.
Just a bit of topic question. Technical question. Does the new autograder, then the one that you show us when we were doing the classes, the one that you click on the IDE, is that running on the IDE or is that running server
That's
side?
running. No, that's running on your locally on your computer.
That's running locally. So that's the difference.
Mm.
Before we needed to make it run on the GitHub
No,
to see it.
that's still there. That hasn't changed.
Okay.
But it's that the one remote that doesn't work for you guys, doesn't work anymore because I changed its functionality.
So basically, if we wanted to make it work, we will have to reclone the project. You will
no,
have to make the
well,
project.
not really. I will have to configure your project. It's possible.
Or change the configuration. Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. So I just need to change some stuff in there, and that's it. But for you guys, for example, you don't really have to worry about that because you're already done. But there were other students that they need a little bit more time. So
Just envious of that auto test button on the.
Yeah.
That's the one that I want. Like that.
yeah,
click,
Katerina.
test.
So what they are speaking, it's the check solution. They didn't have that. They
No,
had
we need to go to Git, wait for the
Yeah,
stuff, click here.
they
here,
had
here,
to wait.
here.
They had to wait like 5 minutes to get their answer. And now you
Okay.
just click on the solution and and it's also a combination because it was a new version of the homework, a new version of the auto grading, but also a new version of the plugin because the button check solution, you didn't have that button. They have it. So it's a combination of many things. But anyways,
Be happy, Katarina. Be happy.
Yeah, but then
You make
their
the life easier.
but their generation will probably inspire me to do new stuff that will be available for the next generation and not for them. It's always like that. So your generation, Enrique, enjoyed stuff that the other students will be envious, to be honest. So
Yeah.
it's always like that.
Because
anyways,
it was a friend of mine. He did mention it because it was in the beginning of the course.
What was the
Actually,
name of your?
my friend.
What was the
He's
name?
working in Volvo. He's a developer. Yeah, but
okay.
His field is far away from mine. So
Okay.
because even when he did look at Android, for him it was something really interesting. Because he told me, but why you check the results? Because maybe you can do it. I don't know, because this is the way how we have to do it right now. Because by some way he told me, but when I commit or when I can do it directly locally from the ADA. So, but now it explain even more. That's maybe it was not configured. Yeah,
it was not configured exactly.
Exactly.
The new generation of students they can do it locally, but before no.
Yeah.
It was not ready for that.
That's why I was wondering what he's talking about. So okay.
Yeah. Anyways, but very good. So you always need to have that thought. But I would say the main topic for today was this aspect of open source. So in the case of, let's say, Enrique and Murad, look for Android projects. In the case of Katerina, for example, right now, a lot of students, I don't remember if this generation did it, but a lot of students, they find a Kotlin project that it's an open source project. I can look it up, and they use it as a way to continue practicing even more, because some students finish the homework, like the two that you're speaking to right now. They finish the whole 10 tasks significantly quicker, and they Gilberto want more tasks. So they found a project that gives them even more tasks. So that
is one of them.
What you could do. Practice. If you could put it could you put the link, Enrique, on the book circle? Yeah. And then, anyways, but soon when you get to Android, you will be able to do the same thing, basically. But open source is quite nice to see how other people write code. You can, again, play around, test code, all that stuff. Yeah, Enrique, go ahead.
Just one finished thing about one chapter that we didn't touch. The floating point numbers aren't real. I actually found an example of that on the project that I'm working on, because I created a table that that table will be converted to a JSON, and then that JSON will be stored in a database inside the phone. So the first iteration of that table, of that JSON, was handling the numbers as floats. So then I have my numbers as per the table in the JSON, but the moment that the JSON converted into the database, the numbers in the database were different. They were approximations to the float.
So it was they lose precision. They lost precision, or
No, they
like
added
you lose.
exactly. They were different numbers. Instead of 0.55 in the
It was
table
what?
and in the
Ah.
JSON, it was like 0.549999 something
Okay,
whatever.
got it.
So it made a mess of the table. So I had to change everything to double.
Okay.
So that
Okay.
actually happens. It actually happened to me this week. It was like, and then I'm reading the table like, okay, I don't understand the math, what the chapter said, but I saw something like that happening to me. So it's like,
Yeah,
it
exactly.
happens.
Maybe
Real
error in
numbers are not real.
calculation.
Exactly. Yeah, this is a very a lot of math, I would say, in this particular chapter. I didn't even bother to read it completely, to be honest. So, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyways,
it's a bit boring.
yeah, but now it's 12. As you know, I like to finish sharp so that people, yeah. But thank you everyone for joining, and thank you, Katerina, for joining. Hopefully, we can see you on a regular basis as well. And pretty much this is how the book circle works. It's very casual. We speak, it's not like we are about to learn Kotlin or nothing like that. It's more casual, exchanging experiences and things like that. So once again, everyone, thank you for joining, and I will see you
Thank
either
you.
on lecture or help session or next week, okay?
Yeah.
Hello.
Thank you.
Good.
Thank you.
Hello,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.